Hello, everyone. I'm John Byrne with Poets and Quants. Welcome to Center Court. This is our fireside chat with a special guest, someone I've known for a very long time and I greatly admire, and someone who knows the ins and outs of business education like few do, and a leader himself. His name is Brian Mitchell. He's Associate Dean at the Goizueta Business School at Emory University. Brian is the head of the full-time MBA program. He is also the head of global strategy and initiatives at Emory's Goizueta School. And he has an unusual qualification. He actually left Goizueta for a little bit to get his graduate degree in higher education at Harvard. And that degree is in higher education and leadership. So I can't think of a better person to talk about leadership than you, Brian. Welcome.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it. It's great to be back with you. And soon enough, we'll be able to get back in person to do this together and catch up properly. But it's great to be here.
So let's just start with like a basic thing. What's the school's general philosophy on leadership? Obviously, this is a part of MBA education that's critical. And schools have really doubled down on leadership, I'd say, in the last probably quarter of a century, but especially in the last 10 years. So what's Goizueta's approach?
Yeah, you're absolutely right about business schools doubling down. I often say, we say a lot here that as diverse as our students are in terms of the areas where they want to develop and the areas where they may want to work and contribute, one of the common threads throughout is everybody comes here because they want to be a better leader, because they want to develop more of their leadership competencies, whether they've had some, a lot, or none, right? And so it's really important. It's actually fundamental what we do. And I say that if you look at our mission, I mean, it's fundamental to the DNA of Goizueta. So you'll see things that are very intentional that we say, like principled leadership. And if you ask, what our philosophy on leadership is, it comes out in these things, right? So principled leadership. You'll see global leaders, and you'll see leaders at the intersection of business and society. So if you think about it in terms of Goizueta specifics, it's really, I would say, those three things. We focus in on leaders who are principled, ethical, and there's a lot we could talk about with regard to that. Leaders who have a global perspective, who are not just insular and thinking about what's right in front of your nose. And then the idea that business has a unique opportunity to positively impact society. That is something, as you well know, John, is fundamental to us here at Goizueta.
Absolutely. What are some of the things that you do in the MBA experience to basically teach leadership and allow people to practice it? Because practice is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we talk about it in three kind of buckets of what we do. The teaching part, or the curricular part, is very important. And you and I have talked about this before, where there are some philosophies out there, I don't ascribe to this, but who say, leadership can't be taught. It has to only be experienced. Well, there are aspects of leadership that can be taught. You can learn a lot from someone else's experience. You can learn a lot from people's successes and failures and leadership in a formal and theoretical way. So that's one aspect that we focus on in the core. So every student has some exposure to it. And then in our elective courses, you can jump into the deep end of the pool and study this to the nth degree. But the other two pillars are the experiential component, because there is truth to the fact that, you do have to actually do it. You do have to actually practice it in yourself, fail, stub your toe. So there are things like we have a leader's reaction course at Fort Benning that's led by General Ken King, who you're familiar with here at Goizueta, who leads our leadership programming across all of our programs. We have an Advanced Leadership Academy where the capstone is a sailing component where you learn to sail this boat, but you're also competing and doing challenges that put you in different leadership positions or different team positions every day. So there are a lot of leadership components or experiential components that supplement the classroom. And then the third piece is reflection. And this is something that's really, I think, under-indexed in a lot of environments, is the amount of intentionality that it takes to reflect on every experience that you're having, every experience that you're leading or that you're a part of. So we do AAR, so after action reviews is something that we teach throughout. And when you put those three things together, it comes out with a really nice, leadership sort of blanket for that development that so many students are really seeking.
And then the other part of this, I think, is the co-curricular experience. I know that the culture at Goizueta is very student-centered, and it allows students to take leadership positions in different clubs and organizations to basically, flex their muscles and get in shape.
Absolutely. And it's early and it's often, right?
Yeah.
So in the students first, so we break our first semester up into 3 blocks. Our core semester is broken into 3, we call them academic blocks. In the very first academic blocks, we have leadership opportunities that people can, get exposed to and participate in right away. And recently we've expanded this. So we used to have, our MBA programs are broken down into sections and then they're broken down into teams. When we used to have 1 leader per section, and we've expanded to 3 leaders per section. So we now have a first-year academic council. But that's born out of a few different objectives. And one of those is to diversify the leadership opportunities, even that first semester, first block students have. And it's about getting more reps in, right? Getting more practice in, even in a brand new environment. So you're absolutely right. Co-curricular programming is critical.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier, Brian, the issue of principled leadership, not just mere, leading others, but leading others in an ethical, fair, and honest way with high integrity. How do you instill those principles?
Well, you see this guy staring over my shoulder here. This is Mr. Goizueta, and he is ever present here.
And if you don't know who he is, he was one of the great leaders of the last century.
Without question, without question. I mean, there's so much I can say about Mr. Goizueta. He is our namesake. And we talk, again, from the first day that students arrive about our core values. And our core values are derived from Mr. Goizueta's life and legacy and the people who knew him and worked with him, but it's kind of the culture of our school. And being focused on core values like courage and integrity and accountability, rigor, diversity, team, community, being focused on those core values really helps our students think less about the jobs they want to do and like the business card they want to have, and more about who they want to be and what type of influence they want to have, and what type of leadership style they're developing into. So we're very values focused when it comes to that. We also have the privilege of being part of a university that has a world-renowned Center for Ethics here at Emory. Mm-hmm. And one of the professors that's operated out of the Candor School of Divinity, and one of the professors is a mentor of mine, Robert Franklin. He is a chair professor in moral leadership. Huh? Dr. Franklin is former president of the Morehouse, shameless plug, my undergrad alma mater. So we have a lot in common. But he's been kind enough to come over and be the keynote, for example, for our leadership capstone course. So it's very intentional about getting that moral leadership and ethical leadership woven into our program.
And Brian, what's happened in the last, let's say, 2 years has been a very big increase in consciousness of the need for diversity and inclusion. And I wonder, what your program does to help develop leadership skills that help support students to work and lead others who are very different from them. Yeah. And to embrace them and their ideas, because after all, that's how we get to a better place.
There's no question about it. I couldn't agree with you more. We've all lived through this last year, and unfortunately are still living through aspects of that even to this day that make it more apparent that we need to be having these conversations around leading in diverse contexts, leading diverse teams, being diverse on your teams in every aspect of it. So leadership is a strategic initiative here at the business school at Goizueta, and so is diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that's new as of this year. And that is a really big step for us to put, those kinds of things on par with entrepreneurship and innovation, business and society. And so having that intentional conversation around where does diversity, equity, and inclusion fit in gives us a chance to think about that, like you said, in the curriculum and then in our co-curricular experiences as well. One of the things that I always, try to impart with our students in our programming here is when we think about diversity, obviously we think about it in the kind of demographic terms we're all used to, but it's also about global diversity and global inclusion. And one of the ways we bring that into the program is by partnering with the university to bring cultural and historical context to the areas of the world where we're studying business. So before we take our students to, name a country, Japan, South Africa, wherever we're going, we have experts from outside the business school come in and bring that cultural competence. And that is a way of building empathy and a way of building an understanding of other cultures that I have found to be really, really unique and really valuable for students to really appreciate global diversity.
Yeah, really good point. And the other thing here is you can learn leadership lessons from people in fields outside of business. When I think about what Stacey Abrams has been able to achieve in Georgia, I think about incredible leadership, okay?
Right.
So looking at this through different lenses is also very helpful for people. Now, you see people when they come into the MBA program, and you see people when they go out. And I wonder if 10 years of that, which you have in your background, allow you to say, here's how I see these people change. Many people talk about the MBA as a transformational experience. You see it. Reflect on it for me. Tell me how people are when they come into the program and when they graduate. What have they become in terms of leadership?
Well, you mentioned I see people when they come in and I see them when they leave. And you also see all of my gray hair here. You mentioned the 10 years, which is amazing. But I also see them every day in between. And one thing you know about us at Goizueta, John, we are a very high touch program. And so the transformational experience is something I get to be a part of every day. And so I see it, even the nuances. And so one of the things that I'm most pleased with or proud of, however you want to put it, is a number of students who come to us without business backgrounds. And I mean like really without business backgrounds. So we have a current student who comes to us from a dual degree from the divinity school, and has never studied business before in her life. And she's in the one-year program right now. And I've watched her confidence build. And I've watched her go from a person who doesn't know how to get into, how to get into the conversation, how to lean in, how to let their voice be heard, to someone in just a matter of months who's confident because they are grasping the content, right? So not just the leadership content, but also the functional content. And they're owning their voice, their leadership voice. And this person who I'm thinking of in my mind now just was elected to a vice president position, student leadership co-curricular position for diversity and inclusion for her class. I see that in the program, and I certainly see it once students leave and have gotten into the next phases of their careers. Obviously your publication reports a lot on our consulting numbers, right? The largest percentage of our graduating class goes into consulting than any other school. And so we've seen people rise the ranks of consulting really quickly because of the kinds of team leadership skills that they've learned and practiced here at Goizueta, the types of communication skills, communicating up, down, and sideways. So that's something that's really impressive, and I'm really proud of as well.
Now, 5 years ago, you came back after a pause in your Goizueta career from Harvard with a graduate degree in higher education leadership. What did you find out, I wonder, from your experience stepping back and studying leadership, and how did it change you?
It changed me at my core, John, and I have to tell you that experience is key to me still being here. So for others who don't know me like you do, John, I am a career switcher. The first 20 years of my career was in the private sector in pharmaceutical. And I came to Emory into this role not knowing anything about higher education or working in the business, anything about that. And there, I can tell you that story another time. But I got here and was really confused and somewhat frustrated by the difference in how decisions are made and how leaders act and behave. And so I went back to school to study that in a formal way. And the two specific things that I studied were leadership and governance, and how leaders make decisions in this environment differently. And the idea of shared governance and the idea of loosely coupled systems are two of my key takeaways that I think are reasons why I'm still able to be here and be sane and be effective in this job. So shared governance is a real thing in higher ed that we try to minimize in the private sector for the sake of efficiency. But here, collaborations, committees, decisions that are made by consensus is something that I had to learn and really practice to become a more effective leader. And I certainly learned that the theory of that at Harvard, and it made my blood pressure just go down every time I thought about Emory. I'm like, oh, okay, it makes sense now.
Because you viewed that at all as unnecessary bureaucracy, and it took a long time to get simple things done. And now you found appreciation for the need to gain consensus and have everyone on board rowing in the same direction.
So the way I used to put it was, I was always running around here at Goizueta trying to fix things that were not broken. And so you end up frustrating yourself, trying to change a system that's been the system for 500 years. And so studying why it's that way, again, the historical context, it really helped me become a better leader. And the idea of loosely coupled systems is pretty similar, where the business school doesn't necessarily work closely with the law school or the college, and so how to navigate that when in a business, it would be much more closely aligned. So at a university, how do you navigate a highly decentralized system? That was really hard lesson. Those were really hard lessons to learn, but important lessons to learn. And I think I've been very much more effective since studying that and coming to terms with it than I was before.
Yeah, and that latter issue has become more important in business schools as they reach out across the university to gain the advantages of interdisciplinary work and people.
Yeah, I mean, and well, and I'm another shameless plug, but I had the privilege of working with a dean who was a collaborator at her core. This is Erica James, who I worked with for 6 years here, was a collaborator at her core and was a champion for what I like to say is walking down the hill, knocking on the door, shaking hands, and having conversations with people at other units to help us get better and to see how we could help them get better. And again, you were talking about leadership. That is a critical leadership characteristic that I had the benefit of experiencing.
So true. If you had to say, what are the 3 key leadership skills that students need to be successful in business? What would you say the 3 are?
Well, I think empathy is one that comes to mind immediately. And, we teach about it, you can call it compassion and all that, but that's one that comes to mind immediately because it helped me as a professional early in my career make a huge difference in understanding people and cultures and having that sense of empathy. The second one I would say is pragmatism. I mean, we can analyze and think and be as compassionate as we want, but at the end of the day, we do have to make decisions. We do have to advance the business. And so being a pragmatic decision maker, I think, is important. And I don't want that to get lost in the conversation around all the niceties of leadership. You have to be pragmatic as well. And then I think, last but not least, you probably hear this a lot, you have to be an excellent communicator. Great leaders communicate very effectively, as I say often, up, down, and sideways. You're not just talking down to people who are working for you. You're not just talking, you're talking in every direction and listening, which is a critical component of communication. You have to be an excellent communicator. And I think if you have those 3, and there's a litany of others, I'm sure, but you've got the core.
Yeah, those are 3 good ones for sure. Now, Brian, a lot of MBAs go into school to get the degree and have the experience because they're focused on what's going to happen after they graduate, and the focus often is their career path. You know, what industry or company will they work for? What specific role will they play? And I'm thinking that sort of goal, that objective, that's post MBA, may often get in the way of thinking about what kind of person and leader do I want to be, and how can I use the MBA experience to develop that, and make that happen. So I wonder, what advice would you have for students about that whole journey?
Yeah, it's inevitable, right? Like most students do come here with that in mind, kind of the golden business card in mind. And we do try to help. And I think over time, certainly over a year or two, people do kind of ease off of that and realize that it's more about what kind of impact do I want to have?
Mm.
What kind of legacy do I want to leave? Versus what's the name on the business card or the job title. I mentioned our core values earlier. We do plenty of active exercises to get people to think about themselves and their journey around each of those values. So, accountability. What am I doing to be more accountable as a leader, as a person, right? So take the emphasis off of the how am I going to be a better consultant or investment banker, but how am I going to be more accountable? How am I going to demonstrate more courage? And I think my advice to students is if you think about what are your own core values and align your journey to those values, then that's going to be applicable to whatever job and whatever company, whatever role, whatever you start, whatever you lead, all of those things that if you center on your values, you can't go wrong.
Very true. You've said a couple of things above and beyond those three leadership skills that you mentioned a few times during our conversation. One is the importance of self-confidence, not cockiness, not arrogance,
Right.
but self-confidence to be who you are and be genuine and authentic in an environment that's sometimes competitive. And that's a key piece of it. And the other piece is courage. And I think, a lot of people don't often talk about courage when they think about leadership, but it is so important. I remember when I was the editor of Fast Company, and I devoted an entire issue to the subject of courage. And what I remember most is we invited John McCain to write the opening essay for that issue. And the way he defined courage is something I'll never forget. He said, you have to be fearful. You have to be afraid to be courageous, because what courage is acting against fear.
Mm-hmm.
I thought,
Yep.
wow, that's really a smart way to define what courage is.
Yeah. Yeah. Fear is an essential component
Yep.
to courage. And when I talk about pragmatism and decision making, courage is inherent in that because, in your post MBA career, no decisions are going to be easy decisions, right? They're going to come with trade-offs, costs, they're not simple decisions. And therefore, there's going to be risk in making those decisions and being that pragmatic leader. And you have to have the courage of your convictions, the courage of the data. You have to have, you have to do your homework, but you have to have the courage to make difficult decisions. And being afraid to do that to the point that slows you down is problematic. But having the nervousness and having the rigorous process for making those decisions and being that pragmatic, that's the way you push past that fear. And John McCain was right. It's an essential component to courageous leadership.
Brian, it's been a pleasure.
John, it's been too long, my friend. We need to get together again very, very soon.
Agree. I'll be coming to Atlanta soon. I promise. We're going to have a good lunch and a good time together.
I look forward to it.
Absolutely. All right. That was Brian Mitchell, the Associate Dean at Goizueta School of Business at Emory University, talking about leadership. If you go to Emory, you will meet Brian. He will be side by side with you through your MBA journey, whether you take the accelerated one-year program or the two-year program. And when you leave, he will be a friend forever. I know that.
That's right.
Brian, thanks.
Thank you, John. Thank you so much.
All right. And thank all of you. I want to thank all of you for watching. This is John Byrne with Poets and Quants.
Thank you.